Welcome to Close Listening. I'm your host, Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. And I decided a few months ago that I wanted to actually take the time and go back and listen to every Beatles record because I really only knew the Beatles through greatest hits albums, including the excellent Love collection. But I wanted to go back and listen to these songs as they were originally presented in album form. I realized that when the Beatles first started, the idea of the album, it was mostly just an exercise in packaging. But because the Beatles would eventually sort of develop the idea of the album as a focus of selling music, the idea that, the album is the musical, is to the musician as the novel is to the writer, I felt like it was important to, get my hands on these records and listen to them. So we are now on number 3, A Hard Day's Night. Now, so it so happens I do know a few of these songs from before, again, the Beatles being everywhere and having listened to greatest hits collections over the years. And this album starts excellently with a single chord. It's hard to believe that a single chord is distinct, but you know right away, which is that one sound that you're about to hear, A Hard Day's Night. Now, thinking about the other 2 albums that I've heard so far, this might be really the first memorable, clever Beatles lyric. It's a bit of wordplay. One does not have a hard day's night, one has a hard day at work. But, the lyric was a bit of wordplay that was done. And, it makes an already catchy song all the more memorable, and it gets it in your head. Other than that, I think in the solo, there's a cool doubling of high and low notes. And then there's this cool spacey sound in the outro to the song. So even though it's still very much an early Beatles sound, you can hear a bit of the innovation here, a bit of the interest in sonic experimenting, and of course, a major step forward as far as lyric writing goes. One of the things I like about the Beatles is, you never listen to an album of theirs and think all the songs sound the same. So with track number 2, I Should Have Known Better. It starts right away with this distinct little harmonica riff, and it's nice and upbeat. So, even if it's not quite the hit material as A Hard Day's Night, it's still pretty darn catchy. It's a pretty strong follow-up. I would say the lyrics to this one are pretty simple, but it just incorporates all those great elements of early Beatles songs, the oh-oh-ohs, the falsettos, the kind of guitar solo, and of course, that harmonica, which, has been part of the Beatles sound since Love Me Do. Track number 3 is called If I Fell. This one, puts more emphasis on the acoustic guitar sound. It's a bit of a change of pace. It slows things down. It almost gave me a vague medieval feel to it, as if it was like a Gregorian choir singing, like not in any over the top or intentional way, but that was just sort of how I felt with the sound of it. Track number 4 is called I'm Happy Just to Dance With You. And all I had to say about this one, just the Beatles have a real way for, writing songs in minor keys and still making them sound like pop. Like there's something a bit interesting about it, but it's still upbeat. It's not really trying to sound sad. They're provoking you almost by absolutely juxtaposing the sound of the music with the content of the lyrics. Track number 5, And I Love Her. It continues things in this more acoustic and minor vein. It has that, what I call the French coffee shop sound, an absolutely distinct guitar riff. So I've certainly heard that riff before. There's nothing really special to say about the lyrics here, but again, interesting things with juxtaposition, the minor key, it sort of sounds like a intriguing jazzy night, perhaps in some sort of action, some sort of vintage action movie. But it's just everything is calm and quiet and you don't really know what's going on. And then there's this moment in the bridge where it sounds like the key is going to change for a second and it doesn't. And it's just, mildly interesting. Track number 6 really caught me off because it's just had a really classic rock sound to it. It reminds me a bit of the theme song of Happy Days. You have several Beatles singing at once in this one, and I describe it as sort of a messy choir sound. You hear this with some of the early Beatles and the Stones. So the voices don't necessarily sound their most beautiful, but that's almost intentional. The messiness accents the solo singing well, and it's just a very nice, upbeat song. Hadn't heard it before, but I found the falsetto really cool, and it got in my head pretty quickly. Track number 7, I get probably the next most famous song on this album after Hard Day's Night. It's called Can't Buy Me Love. And again, it shows just how important it is to have a memorable lyrical hook for a song. Maybe it's not quite as clever as A Hard Day's Night, but you're pulling things a bit away from the literal by pointing out that love is not a thing you can buy, because of course you can't. Love is not a physical thing, but they're taking the time to put that thought into words. And more to the point, musically, this one, it has, one of the less produced, I would say, sounds on the record. It's really just the core Beatles instruments, guitar, bass, and drums. So it shows, just how important lyrics are to making a hit. I also thought it was kind of interesting that on the second album, they end with John Lennon performing the song Money, Money, That's What I Want. I'm not interested in the higher things in life. And it's almost like Paul answers back by singing Can't Buy Me Love on this one. But I guess that kind of ambivalence about whether they just wanted to be generic, rich celebrities, or they wanted to have higher values was sort of a contradiction the Beatles explored throughout their careers. I think track 8 goes very well with my thoughts on Can't Buy Me Love. It's called Anytime at All. And this one really struck me because John has these really piercing vocals. I found, listening to these Beatles albums, I've grown to appreciate John's voice more, because he's not someone who's thought of as having a beautiful voice per se, but it's a good voice. He sings in key, and, the bitterness of it can be really effective. And it's just this mix of pop vocals at some point, a little bit of softness, but with this sizzling guitar and the real screams on the Anytime at All. Parts of it remind me of bird songs from the Mr. Tambourine Man record. And the reason I said it goes well with Can't Buy Me Love, because in terms of the way the singing sounds, in terms of the instruments, this feels like a much stronger song. But, it doesn't last with you as a hit because there's just nothing clever about the lyrics. Whereas all you have to do is say, Can't Buy Me Love. That's a distinct lyric. And that little bit of distinctness is what makes that one a hit, and what makes Anytime at All just another Beatles album track. Track number 9 is called I'll Cry Instead. This one has a slight country feel to it. Now, on Rolling Stones albums, they'll often do a song that's kind of like a caricatured country tune with Mick Jagger singing in an exaggerated Southern accent, and they really change their instrumental sound. This one, it's more of a subtle country instrumentation, so it fits more naturally with the album. So you'll either like it less or like it more than the Stones one, depending on whether you like their campiness when they do country. The other thing that struck me when they sang this song is there's this lyric that goes, I don't want to cry when there's people there. So, a lot of these early Beatles songs, it's hard to say if the lyrics are really saying anything, because they're just love songs. I don't necessarily think they're from the heart. I think they're just, singing what the fans want to hear. And, this one feels a bit more real because there's this weird way in which all these rock singers sing about crying for girls, but, certainly until very recently, it would have been taboo for men to cry. So there's like this artificial reality of the song where the sensitive man is cool, and there's real life where the more traditional toxic masculine man is cool. And this song is actually sort of, accepting that reality a bit more, where the singer's saying, look, it's kind of awkward if I cry, but I still have these feelings. I'm, still fragile inside. I still do cry. Track number 10 is called Things We Said Today. It has an aggressive opening in a minor key. It reminds me a little bit of Del Shannon's Runaway, which is a truly great song, particularly punctuated by its organ solo. This one doesn't have the organ solo, but you can hear the Del Shannon influence throughout, both with the beat and with the verse being in a minor key and the chorus being in a major key. Track number 11 is called When I Get Home. So it has this weird whoa, whoa sound at the opening, and it kind of struck me as a distorted version of I Should Have Known Better. Rhythmically, it's kind of weird, and there's almost this messy feel to it with the crunchy. One lyric did strike me as a little clever. It says, come on, if you please, I've got no time for triviality. I mean, I guess triviality is a bit of a big word, and a clever rhyme for a simple pop song like this. And I feel like this song, they're actually experimenting with using the musical formula to be expressive and not just to sound good. So they're singing from the perspective of the stressed out man who just wants to get home and see his partner. And so rather than singing a beautiful song, they're singing a song that's a little messy to convey that chaos. Track number 12 is called I'm Gonna Let You Down. This is one I was a bit familiar with. It has a cleaner sound, but at the same time, it's also more rootsy. They're using cowbell for the rhythm and a sort of very clear electric guitar blues riff. So, a very simple song, but a smooth song. I don't know, it would probably appeal to the same people who like Come Together, except it's a much less weird song, though they do have a little bit of melodic diversity when they hit the bridge. And finally, track 13 is called I'll Be Back. I didn't find this one particularly memorable, but I guess with that title, you have to put it at the end. They do some weird texturing again with minor and major keys. And I did think it was one of John's genuinely more beautiful vocals, like not in an interesting way. It's just he has good command of his voice here. He just comes across as very earnest in the song. So it was a nice, if not particularly impressive way to end the album. So overall, A Hard Day's Night was a good listening experience. Obviously I was quite familiar with the classics, A Hard Day's Night and Can't Buy Me Love, and Tell Me Why and Anytime at All ended up being new Beatles favorites for me. So I was glad I was able to discover them by going back and actually listening to the album. So I'm looking forward to discussing Beatles for Sale in my next video. That'll be Beatles album number 4. We're moving along slowly but surely with this project. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.